Hey, it's Jose Galison. This is No Way Jose. You can find me on the No Way Jose YouTube channel. You can also find me on all the major audio podcatchers and on Odyssey as well. Today, my guest is LB Muniz. This right now is a private live stream for my patrons, for those who are interested. And this will not go up for about a week ish, roughly, depending on how I end up, working it out. But usually around that amount of time before it goes up for the goes up publicly. So in the meantime, if you want to be part of the live streams, or if you want to be I'm having a brain fart, or if you want to be, or you want to see the episode before it goes public, you'll have to be a patron. My patron is only $2 a month. And that'll get you access to the live stream and all the episodes. There are different levels after that. The highest being a $20 level, which is for sponsors. And I have, for those, what I do is essentially I read them off. They're my sponsors, so as such. So one of my sponsors, CD McRae of the Whiskey and Tea podcast. That's a good podcast. I've been on it before. Jermaine Vincent. He doesn't really have anything to put out there, but he's the shit. At SpaceCat2K, who I'm going to be having coming on my show soon. I still need to hit him up for a date. Because on my $10 level, that allows you to curate an episode within reason. Like if you're trying to get me to do something I have no interest in talking about, we're not going to do it. But he's coming on, and we're probably going to talk about like agorism versus session. And although I don't really necessarily think it's a versus thing, but we'll talk about it then. I also have Jacob Winograd of the Daniel 3 Biblical Anarchy podcast. And if anyone wants to be part of that Patreon, the Patreon is patreon.com. So it's No Way Jose 2020. Now me and Tower Gang are becoming more official. We're more of a clique. So I'm going to start plugging them more often. So we have coming up Tuesday the 21st, we have Crip Daddy, who is literally a crippled comedian, and he's fucking hilarious. You should go check him out. Then on the 30th, we have Dave Smith coming back, and so that'll be episode 50. It'll be New Year's week, so it'll be a good year in review, and it'll be a fun one. What else we got? And then we have then fucking Clint doesn't have anything for I'm gonna bring far. Who am I thinking? Reed has coming up on the 18th. He has Maria Farner, an Epstein victim, so that'll be a really interesting one. We're probably gonna start getting Mossad coming after the homies, so that'll be interesting. As always, go check out TopLobsta, toplobsta.com. Use Jose at checkout for 10% off. Recently we have me and all the Tower Gang homies are kind of working together a little bit more. We're partnered with TopLobsta, so you'll see if you go to our site, there's a lot more of our stuff, a lot more hyperlinks to go to our content, stuff like that. So support TopLobsta, support me, support Tower Gang, all that good shit. With that, let's go ahead and bring in LB. What's up, dude?
Jose, how we doing?
Doing all right.
Do I look casual? I'm going for hanging out in a hotel because that's what my life is.
You do look very casual. How's everything been for you? You've been kind of making the rounds lately. It's been
I made a round. It was pretty fun. I have to say, I bet you if I wrote an article that was going after the quote unquote post-libertarians, I feel like I would have gotten on a few more shows. But at the same time, I got on the right shows and I wrote the right message, more importantly. So
I'm that, but I don't necessarily agree. I think people say shit like that, because people always make like grifting accusations or whatever, because they'd be like, if I hop on this, whatever this. But I actually think to some extent there's something to the low time preference approach, which you clearly have had with your show. You definitely just kind of, slow, just kind of put out your content, good content. I'm not saying anything wrong with your content, but you definitely were not vying for attention. And so it was kind of this thing when people discovered it, there was like this wealth of things, like, holy fuck. And also I feel like it's pretty obvious you're not jumping around from, I don't know, you're being intellectually honest, essentially. And I feel like people can smell it when people aren't. Like, for example, the post-libertarian moment, I'm not saying this individual was intellectually dishonest, but it came off as a bad faith thing. But I know you probably know what I'm talking about. I mean, I don't even mind to say his name. I just don't really feel like it. But going after Pete and all that shit with the kind of who's the Chris Cantwell kind of thing?
Oh,
you know
what I'm talking about? New Hampshire.
Yeah, Justin. Yeah, I like Justin.
Shots. I've been taking shots at him in particular, for sure.
Yeah, that came off to me as, I don't know if I'd necessarily say bad. Okay, it was kind of bad faith. I'm gonna be straight up. It was either bad faith or ignorant. It was one of the two, or a mixture.
It's also like a really intellectually it's an intellectually lazy argument, is what it is, right? It's like this person is saying something that I don't like. I'm going to associate him with something else that I don't like. Therefore, this person is that person. And now everybody don't see, look at me. I just figured this thing out. Yeah. And there's, like I said, to me, it's just an intellectually dishonest argument. And maybe that, and if you're vying for attention, like you said, we all kind of vie for attention in our own way. This like podcasting is in one sense a hobby. It's another sense something that you'd maybe like to have be a source of income, or at the very least paying for itself, right? Yes. The way somebody might like shoot pool and or play poker, and the idea is that you do it for the sake of it, but you're not necessarily making all of your money on it. And so like I have no issues. Like I take shots, right? Like I play that game a little bit too. That's one of the reasons why we're talking, is because I've been taking shots at Agorism. And there's no, and thank you. I only kid because, you want more attention as a writer, and, and it's good to have ambition, which is maybe the more important aspect, and to try and harness that ambition in a healthy way. And I almost didn't write the essay because I was like, oh man, I don't want to get pigeonholed with this. And then I realized that it's kind of like, to answer all of, like at the end of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where the answer to the existence is 42 or 24 or something like that. People who like that book and movie are gonna hate me for butchering it right now, but I literally just can't remember. But it's like, I
don't remember exactly what it is too, but I remember it's like a number.
But like another way you can answer like what's the purpose of existence, I was just thinking of this recently, was like lean in. Like just like lean into it, whatever it is. And if it turns out what you're leaning into sucks, like then you make a move. But lean into just kind of the comical, like the literal cosmic irony of existence sometimes. Or at least I've tried to do that a little bit more and be like, okay, you know what? I'm the guy who said moment, not movement. And, I better explain what that means, because I don't want this to, because frankly, I care about the ideas. Which is funny, because some people have like approached you as hostile, or approached me as hostile, or like seen other people, or like somebody like Pete getting approached with hostility. It's like it's an affect of human nature to a certain extent, but it's like I care about the ideas. Like I care about human freedom and flourishing. It's the reason like my grandparents came to this country for specifically that. So the fact that maybe I say things like, we're at the end of we might be at the end of the American experiment. We are officially post-constitutional order at this point. There is no living, breathing constitution in the United States of America. It's been on life support, and they pulled the plug last year. That doesn't mean I don't care about freedom. That means we have to figure out what to do now, which is the other aspect of what I've been doing with a lot of the work, and what I'm trying to push into more is challenge the rigor of the thought in the movement. This movement that I've been a part of too.
Yeah, I did want to back up a little bit on the post-libertarian thing. I did think some of the critiques, like I don't know why. I guess this was just sticking in my head when you were talking about it. The one talking point I kept hearing over and over again around that period when it was really getting attacked is like, "This is nothing new. This is nothing new." And it's kind of like, who the fuck ever said it was?
Nobody. Right. But what you're doing is you're like, oh well, I don't need to pay attention to this, right? It's a signaling thing. It's like, nobody said, with the exception of archotropism, right? Andrew's archotropism framework is something new, right?
Yeah, I think then you probably could find parallels in certain ways, I'm sure, if you digged. But it is, I haven't heard anything like that yet before. But
yeah, a lot of
all the decades and centuries of philosophy and such, maybe there's got to be something. But to me, seems new. But yes.
Correct. Well, what he does is he uses a framework that we're all familiar with within vis-a-vis like praxeology and the Austrian school, and he uses that to expound on his ideas. Because you're completely correct, right? Historically speaking, I mean, Nietzsche's whole thing was the will, or one of his many things was the will to power, right? So this idea of analyzing power and how it operates was something the Marxists did as well, right? Most schools of thought have some way of conceptualizing what power is, how it operates. I think Andrew's framework is really interesting. I look forward to the more he develops it, but what I've seen is certainly helpful enough to like answer some more immediate questions about specifically political strategy, right? But you're right. You're definitely right that other people have spoken about power throughout human history. And one thing I try to do, like when I was on King Pilled, and Andrew asked, like, he's like, what makes like people like him and maybe myself and Matt Erickson different from some of the other people? And I kind of flippantly, as kind of a joke, but you know, because it was accurate, is say like, well, we're well read, and we have a longer time view of history. And I think that's something I notice about people right away is what did history begin the day you were born? How far back does history go for you? And I don't think everybody has to have a time frame of history that goes back to, you know, before Socrates. That's not what I'm saying, right? I don't suffer under an egalitarian delusion. My point would be to say like, okay, well, hey, look, I'm taking this time frame. Maybe your time frame that's talking about the last 50 years could use some could benefit from some ancient knowledge reapplied to today. And there's and that and you're and that's and you know what? The critics are exactly right, because that is nothing new. That's the basic thing you're supposed to do. And any kind of intellectually honest, healthy movement would have that. One of the reasons why it's also been met with it is because there's a political consequence to it currently, which is going to trace along another conversation you wanted to have. So let me just take the time to say, right, without the LPMC, Piquignones questioning anarchy is just an interesting thing that's happening. And that's a testament to what the LPMC has built, right? And there's just some of us who are now saying like, yeah, this isn't, if we want to do political things as libertarians, my position is, I'm very comfortable saying it now, I don't think the LP is the avenue for that. I think the LPMC has the infrastructure to do it, but I don't see the point in taking over a political party just to then run people for office. I think and a political party that only gives you name recognition of a loser. And you know, we can get it. And like literally for me, it was because they bear my name. I'm a libertarian, so I'm going to join the Libertarian Party. So I get that. Like I understand that. So that's my position. I'm happy to. I'm sure that's not the topic of our conversation, but
no, I was gonna.
But it traces. It touches on the whole question of politics versus no politics.
Yeah, no, we'll get into that because I legit just want to have a critique. I have my own critiques of agorism. I was going to use as a basic structure your article because you kind of had five. Was it five? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, five points in yours, and they are similar points that kind of come up when it comes to agorism. And you were also mirroring it off of Brandon Aragorn. I don't fucking know. His last. Yeah, something like that. You were basing off of his article on the Agorist Nexus, which is actually a great site for anyone who wants to check it out. I don't necessarily have any ill will against Brandon. I guess that'd be a good place to start so people understand the context, because it is kind of funny. All of the what unfolded from your article, but it also does make for a good jumping off point for a serious discussion aside from the silly Twitter drama. But there is something funny to the silly Twitter drama, and I do think it. Not necessarily that I want to. I don't really know. I'll be honest. I didn't read any of their fucking articles. We talked about this before, but for people watching later, I didn't read it. I opened it. It was fucking way too long, and like I'm not a normal article reader. I saw LBs, and because I was trying to read up before I went into this, LBs was a reasonable length for an article. Like what, in my opinion, his and then some of the response with Jeremiah's were stupid fucking long. I don't know. Whatever you can say about that, what you want, but like, I'm sorry. I have books to read, podcasts to listen to. I don't give a shit about your fucking article. Not you specifically. And there is something to. Whatever.
You said that to me before, right? You're like, yeah, dude, I'm not going to read everything you're. I'm like, yeah, it's cool, man. We can still be homies. Like, I don't expect to the people who do. It means it really means the world to me. If when you're taking your morning shit, you open up and you read the email that's there from beenawake.com. It really means the world to me when you do that. And I am trying, and when I do my best writing, it is something that you can read on the toilet in the morning, because that's what we're all doing. It's kind of comical. Yes. I touch on serious issues though. Yes. Right. But I've tried to make it consumable. And I would argue, frankly, that's what a good writer does. That's what somebody who's interested in, this is the way I view it, right? Like people trading their time to read something that I wrote because they think it's going to bring them insight into the world is a huge responsibility to bear, right? And even with the modicum of increase that I've had in attention, right, and the new subscribers, is like has reinforced that for me. And I don't even have 500 followers on Twitter. So like it is something that I take seriously, even though I'll be playful with it at times when it's required. And one of those things is making sure that you can put something together that somebody can consume, whether it's whether it's a well-produced hour podcast like I do, whether it's coming on a show like this, or whether it's writing, which is for me kind of that's the working out, right? Like doing the writing is the working out that like helps your mind get better, more agile, and be able to like formulate better arguments. So, there you can critique people for not reading. This frankly is at the heart of the divide. And this frankly is and why there's a difference between, myself and other writers and producers in the space is I don't blame you for the fact that you don't want to read my article. I blame me. Because if you don't want to read my article, that means I didn't do a good enough job. Not that you're an idiot for not reading.
Yeah. And on top of that, there's people who consume like during the lockdowns, I did a lot more article reading because I had way more time in my hands. But now I pretty much only do books or podcasts because I don't have I very rarely read an article. It has to really catch my attention. That's just me personally. Everyone consumes their media differently. I'm generally like, I like podcasts because I can do it while I'm doing shit, and I like audiobooks because I can listen to it while I'm doing shit. And like if I'm going to actually sit down and read, for me, I guess I'm more old school and I like a book. But or a short article, depending on what it is. So like a long article that like basically you throw me out. But I'm sure it's different for everyone. I mean, that's just me personally. I've written a few articles myself. I know how it is when an article gets away from you and gets long, and you're like, but at the same time, you kind of find yourself like you almost are like married to your work to some extent. So you're like, I should edit this, but you're like, but God, it's so good. But
I've struggled with that. And anybody who does something creative struggles with that, right? It's like you can't and that's just where again you have to for me it's about improving. Right? So like I've always been a decent writer. And I kind of joked about when I started the project, I was like, college might be the worst thing for my writing career. And I think it was. Because I definitely read some good books. I learned from some interesting people whom I respect, and I'm thankful for their tutelage. Moreover, but they're twofold. One, the length, right? This idea that I have to put together a 10-page article to make the best kind of argument is not without its purpose, but outmoded, right? And I was doing an undergrad in philosophy. So like, of course that's part of it. But the second aspect of being so afraid of not putting together the perfect article that you basically, it's like, for me at least, I procrastinate, stay up the whole night putting together the article on like Adderall and caffeine and nicotine, right? Like, and just like putting together something that's pretty good at the last minute. But like, because I didn't want to go through an editing process or something like that, I would wait to the last minute to put something together. Right. So it's like, not to say that I wasn't also just a hard-headed young 20-year-old who was figuring his stuff out. But what I like to say is that I replaced the idea of perfection with consistency. So now when I write like the critiques of the Agorism article that I wrote, some of them were like, "Oh, he misspelled stuff." It's like, yeah, dude, I bought a pack of cigarettes for the first time in years. I ripped one, was buzzing on nicotine, and I just decided to have some fun writing this article. So yes, I'm sorry. I don't have a proofreader. Sometimes I can't catch my own mistakes. But like that's I don't let that stuff bother me because when I read my article on my show, I'm like, whoops, I made a typo. Like, it's part of the deal. The same way in which like if there's a production issue, like you're going to get upset about it because you want your stream to be perfect. You want your product to be as good as it can be. But at the end of the day, you still got to get the product out to the customer. And what the customer wants is the consistency, and they want the content.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I mean, that's a good way to put it in context. Because like, I mean, everyone who watches my show knows it's not the highest production value, but like I do care about it. But at the same time, I would rather not fret about the little things. It's kind of like when it comes to public speaking. Like when I learned, I have my little isms. Everyone has their own little isms when it comes to public speaking, like and shit like that. And I know if I took a public speaking class at one point, and I remember like there was a couple that I really bombed because I was so focused on not fucking up. whereas or like not doing the not doing it. But you just kind of come to a point where you're like, it's like if I just say fuck it and just do it, and if I say an whatever, like just move on, like don't even notice doing it, and then in a weird way, I feel like that actually makes you better because you're like, and it's just like it's kind of almost kind of comes with school. I always said the best way to like learn, or the best way when it comes to like tests, like say you're in school, is like to like study or give a fuck enough to study, but don't give a fuck when the day comes, because if you care, it'll fuck you up. And it's kind of the same way when it comes to like public speaking or even writing. If you focus too much on the little shit, like you got to put in the work in. You do have to put in the work, but at the same time, you also can't focus too much on the shit that will fuck you up, because then you'll get caught up in your head. You're gonna, I don't know. It's just not a good place to be. I mean, I'm sure that applies for a writer, public speaker, school, whatever. So
it applies for everything, really. I mean, when you get a new job and you're trying to figure everything out, and you just kind of realize you gotta fake it till you make it. There is an element of that in everything that you do. And I don't know that I would say I've made it, but I wouldn't say that I'm faking it necessarily. But like, and you could say like, oh yeah, whatever, podcasters just talking about how to get better at pods. Like, well, there is something to be said for the fact that being an effective speaker is like one of the things that you should do in life, is become as good of a speaker as you can. You're probably not going to be the best, right? Very, very few people are going to be at a Barack Obama level of rhetoric, intonation, like all like just vocal control. There is a lot that goes into giving a good speech or like having good diction that you learn over a lifetime, right? And I just happen to like, my background isn't really sports heavy, it's performing arts heavy. So like I was on stage, and so I kind of got good at using a microphone at a young age. I had a band, so like I knew how to use a microphone and recording software, and that just turns into this one day. And so I just wanted to hit that point of like, it might seem silly, but like public speaking is something that people should work on, and is sure. And to the criticism of everybody having a podcast, that's usually from somebody who isn't good at public speaking. You can that's almost a truism, because
it's almost always someone who had a podcast and failed.
And like I
or gave up, not failed. There's no such thing as failing. You just keep going. But they gave up at some point because they felt like they failed, because they didn't get whatever their metric for success was.
Sure.
Exactly. But let's we're getting off topic, which is common when we've talked. It's been a while since we've had a conversation together, but I know I was on your show way back when, but
about a year ago, almost.
Yeah, I know it's been a minute. I've been wanting to have you on, but we were saying before we start recording, it's always like looking for a topic, and I always knew, what do I want to talk to? I always kind of kept you in the back of my head. I'm like, I need something to talk to LB about. And when you went after this, I was like, all right, here we go. Here's a good conversation, because I think I'm one of the few non-cunty agorists you could probably have this discussion with. Because I was kind of talking before we went on this other little rabbit trail, but I don't have anything against Brandon Aragon. Jeremiah, fuck that guy. I don't like him. I have no problem saying that publicly. He's a fucking. I think
he's not a fan of you either.
No, he's not. Have you seen that, or has he said something? I haven't.
He addressed it. Because I in the tweet thread that I put out, he was on there. I do want to give a quick shout out and the Reality Czars pod. I was on their show recently, and cool. they both like Agorism, or at least the main guy does, and they were cool. We had an interesting talk. So just to shout them out, because they did claim fealty to Agorism and weren't entire cunts. Yeah. So
what did Jeremiah say about me though? Do you remember or not? I mean, I guess
I think it had to do with you. I think it had to do with your very reasoned take about on the Thaddeus Russell situation.
Oh, that was the whole reason that was the whole reason. My take, my whole take was that like basically Thaddeus with all the kid stuff was basically taking an egoist perspective, and I even said to Thaddeus at some point that age of consent is, because everyone gets him shit for his age of consent thing, which I can get. Like, it is weird that he focuses on it, but at the same time, I said something to Thaddeus once at some point where it's like, I don't think age of consent is technically a thing, but at the same point, like, age of consent is that age at which I will not put a bullet in your head if you do it.
and you as a father talking about your daughter, which it was the context as well, which is the like you extrapolate, as I think I quote tweeted you, and I said you extrapolate from that point and you have civilization.
Yeah, like I don't
Full
give
stop.
a shit if you're like, well, objectively speaking, there's no age of consent. I'm like, yeah, I agree. I don't give a shit.
Correct. Well, and the important thing with that too is, there's some like somebody like Thaddeus Russell, who is a trained academic and is very like I'm very comfortable exploring dangerous ideas. I have zero issues with it. It's not what I spend most of my time doing because I'm interested in producing a product that people want to listen to, right? So I don't stick on the edge. I try to stay somewhere in like a popular frame, or maybe bring marginal ideas. I don't know. The point being, there is a place for very nuanced and like exploratory conversations about very difficult and sensitive topics. Master's level classes, perhaps.
Twitter's not it.
I would say no.
Yes, which is what everyone said when he was doing that. It was like, and I agreed. But then at the same time, I talked to him. I don't know if I talked to him, but I know Clint had him on his show. They talked about. They actually brought up my tweet in that one of like that point, and Thaddeus was like, I 100% agree. So Thaddeus is just totally taking the egoist, postmodernist, whatever perspective of like, it's like, okay, yes, age of consent's not this thing, and I everyone gets mad about it, but it's like, show me an objective reasoning for age of consent. But at the same time, I'm an egoist. I don't give a shit. Like my point is like,
why would we presume that an objective category exists when it doesn't? Like just to the frame of conversation, which is the point that somebody like Thaddeus Russell is bringing to the conversation. A similar one that I do, by the way, from a because there is a crossover between postmodernism and skepticism, right? Like postmodernism incorporates a lot of skepticism into its school. Lest we get too far down this rabbit hole, I think this is what happens when you have a group of people who are like really interested in ideas, as libertarians tend to be, which is like, we're just going to pick this up and run, right? And we've seen different things like that. And like one recent one, the one that I talked about on Pete's show, was the whole like bum shooting up in a playground. Like, is that an acceptable? Is it a violation of the NAP to get rid of a bum shooting up heroin in a playground?
I pissed off some people with that one
Homesteading?
too, because I actually took the position that I'm okay with it, like
removing
a lot of people are with removing them. Yeah, I don't give a shit.
Yes.
Like, like I don't know. I mean, I get it. Like, you can make some like autistic argument about like, but at some point we need to be reasonable and be like, okay, this is public property, and like, I mean, I don't know. I get it. We can be like, well, there's other options or whatever. But if we're in a situation in which there isn't, it's like, well, okay, well. I mean, we can be reasonable and understand that in a private society, this would not be happening. So can we not treat this as if it was a private society and get the security to deal with it?
Not happen.
Like, make it not happen. Like, what the fuck?
Or make it stop happening.
I get it. They're not the greatest thing, but you know what? They've put me in this position where they're a monopoly and they're my only option. So.
Well, there's Nietzsche has this bit about the moralizers that I've written about at beenawake.com, and I've quoted from it and added some of my own interpretation to it. But like, he basically goes through this like very long and long argument that is like, the moral, and I just wrote about moralizing and in-group preferences. I did I'm actually really proud of the episode. I don't always say this about like the solo episodes I do, but the one I just did about getting to the bottom of virtue signals was pretty good. And it traces to what I'm about to say, which is like, Nietzsche talks about how the moralizers come forward and they always say that this is no, you don't understand. The people in the past, they've had it all wrong. I have it all right. I am the new master of the age. I have all the answers to your questions. And what Nietzsche says is that invariably laughter overcomes the most ardent of moralizers. Like the person who, because that person who's putting themselves up on a moral pedestal, that person can't stand laughter, because laughter undermines their entire mode of being, right? Like, you can't be the moral authority and have people laugh at you, because you can't laugh because they're wrong, and you can't laugh at because you can poke fun at it, right? It's the very obvious trope now of all the world leaders taking private jets to go to conferences about climate change. Right? They just pretend that that's not hypocritical by any stretch of the imagination, right? They just don't even address it. And you would be in those circles, right? Let's say that you were a comedian opening up for that bit. If you were to address it, it would kind of be in poor taste for the audience, right? It's the Ricky Gervais doing an act for the people at home and not for the people sitting in the audience by lambasting by lambasting some of the pretension that exists in a place like Hollywood. So it's like, so like these things exist. These things have always existed, and the whole point. My point here is to say, like, this is why I think you have to laugh at yourself, and like why I'll laugh at myself and be a little playful with things. Because if you take yourself too seriously, you're gonna get you're eventually gonna get overcome by laughter. And when like, you know, this little corner of Twitter tries to talk about whether or not a homeless person shooting up heroin in a park in a public park next to children, whether like we should worry about, you know, or whether it should be a question of whether or not they should stay there. Like that's crossing into the level of absurd. Like you're not pushing ideas to their natural conclusion. You're showing the absurdity to pushing any idea to an absolute conclusion.
Reductio ad absurdum, yeah.
Because you can't reason like they did at the scientific revolution, right? You can't reason like Descartes did, because we understand that's not actually how the human mind works. It's like, it's beautiful prose. It's really interesting. It's worth engaging with this time frame in history, but you have to update the software. You can't just, you don't look at a Rene Descartes and you say like, oh, well, this is clear. Rationalism is clearly the only method by which we can determine truth, which I would argue somebody like Konkin does. Throughout his method in general, and why a certain type of rationalist brain gets very triggered when I take some pot shots and kind of like, you know, like I talk out of both sides of my mouth, where I say I'm just writing an article, but I'm clearly taking shots. Like, you know, either you can handle that, you know, to the point. It's like, you know, I think we mixed it up once in like a group chat about like faith and like our differences of opinion on that. And I was like, well, here I've written about this, and this, and you're like, dude, I'm not gonna read that. I'm like, fair, that's fine. Yeah, like no big deal. Like, just I'm only making the point that like this isn't something I'm just gonna change my mind on. You might not change your mind on it currently. Maybe we'll come to a conclusion one day, but like, all right, cool, whatever, man. Like we can talk about other things.
Yeah. I think it's something you said in there. God, I forget what. I think there's a reason why maybe I'm a little bit more reasonable than some agorists. I think it's because my, like, in a sense, like what undergirds my agorism or libertarianism is egoism. So like essentially I'm coming from this perspective of when I see something like, say, this homeless people in a park things, like I feel like an agorist or a libertarian is going to like go, well, that's not principled. And for me, I start from the beginning point of, you know, what is to my benefit, or, you know, and this isn't like in a selfish way. It's almost this Ayn Randian, you know, type selfishness or whatever, you know, like rational self-interest or whatever. That's kind of where egoism comes from. So if I'm in a situation where I see that, like, I gotta go, that's my starting point. And then I go from there, and then I go, and if I realize that there's something off there, then I go, well, maybe I need to adjust my theory, because it's like, clearly, if my theory is okay with that, I'm either misinterpreting my theory or I need different theory. Because if your theory doesn't work in practice, and it's like one quote I used to like to use a lot is Stirner said, maybe, I don't know if he said exactly like this, but he's like, your principles should serve you. You shouldn't serve your principles. So like, it's kind of the idea of, if your principles aren't applicable, they're shit principles. So you need to figure them out. Like,
and there's probably a little bit of, when did Stirner write again? Because you've talked about him a few times.
I don't know what year it was.
Okay,
I think it was like before Angles and shit like that.
Yeah,
it was.
Anyway, the point being, there's maybe I didn't want to like presume, that's why I was asking the time frame, but there's a little bit of like what became known as American pragmatism in there too, which can be like distilled into, well, the truth is whatever works, right? Yeah. So like there I think, and again, to the point is of like what people have to, like how you should to get by your day. Like, yeah, it's very pragmatic to just like, oh yeah, you know, this is what I believe and all that. You hit on a really good point though that I wanted to address, and I think it's that, like, your egoism comes before this idea of libertarianism or this idea of agorism, right? I say my formulation is saying like the last thing I am is a libertarian, because there are all these other things that make up one's identity. What I encourage people to do is to explore that, because you probably do have other things about yourself beyond libertarianism, and when libertarianism is all you are, you're gonna react to those kinds of criticisms far more easily than somebody who libertarianism isn't all that they are, or at the very least, you're gonna, like, the cognitive dissonance is just gonna get triggered such that you're not gonna be in a frame to understand what somebody else is saying. Because same here, like I consider skepticism my home, right? Like that philosophical basis, right? And like if I was poking holes in egoism, we might have more words about something, right? You might get a little more defensive or like have a little bit harder of a pushback on something. I generally follow in that line of thought as well. So it's, it's maybe not one that I could poke into. Maybe except to say it doesn't exist in an absolute sense, but I don't think that you would even say that. So let's stick with what I wrote and what people said, and we can do something like that or whatever you want, host.
We can discuss egoism some other time, because egoism is a fun one, because it is one of those things where it's kind of like it's almost like a cheat like philosophy, because it's like you kind of can't prove me wrong, because it's just like, well, like literally everything, my entire experience in this world starts from me, so it only makes sense to begin from there. And if you show me something that I'm wrong about, then I'm like, well, okay, well, I guess it's my self-interest to change there, and it's still egoism.
It was Parmenides who said that the man is a measure of all things.
Yeah.
Right. And like Plato tried to reconcile that, or Plato's Socrates, right? Because who we know of as Socrates is often just as much the works of Plato as it is like the utterances of Socrates himself, because we don't know much about the man. But like, Plato's Socrates tried to create the forms as a way to reconcile that, right? So we have these perfect representations of the thing, and don't you see that this is why man isn't the measure of all things? I have always been interested in that subjectivity of existence, and I think, and it informs a lot of my work. So like at a deeper philosophical level that I operate from.
Yeah, that is a lot, definitely, of egoism. It is kind of funny. I was on another podcast the other day, and I think I said to him, as like, the beauty of egoism is I'm never unprincipled. Everything to some extent is for my self-interest, and if you tell me I'm wrong, I'm like, well, okay, whatever, like I'll change it. I don't give a shit.
Yeah. Alternatively, like we're all just still kind of these weird apes that have these technology things and this very sophisticated language. And if you put yourself and if you pay close enough attention to humanity, you see that represented every single day. Here's a fun story on that, because this happened recently. I was talking, I was hanging out with a couple of buddies, and they were just and one of my friends is like, I don't know, 6'3", 6'4". He's like a big guy, he's gotten bigger. Love you, buddy, if you're listening. But so he's like a big dude, well over 6 foot, big beard. And if you don't know him, I guess you might think that he looks a little intimidating, but he's just an autistic teddy bear. He's like one of the sweetest guys in the world. And what they were commenting on is like, dude, it's so funny that anywhere we go, when we go out for drinks, people just approach him and they'll be like, hey, what's up, man? Like, just like, that's it. No, like maybe, oh, what's up, dude? Nice beard. Like, I like that. And they commented in particular that a lot of times black guys would do it too. And it, like in particular, just like, yo, man, what's up? I love your beard. And I'm like, oh yeah. It's because he's the tallest guy in the room. So it's kind of like dogs coming around to be like, hey, are you cool? Like, can we be cool? All right. Because if you're cool, then I'm just going to go be cool over here. Like, no big deal, but you're the biggest person in the room. So I got to make sure that you're not a threat. These behaviorisms like undergird all of our social existence. And in some respects, I think some respects, like the intellectualism is just kind of like, is sometimes, not all the time, obviously, because I enjoy this stuff, but like, it's kind of like sugar. It's kind of like icing at times. Or maybe just better packaging for darker under like just the animalistic nature that is within us, even if we're so far removed from it.
Yeah. You just said something that kind of sparked something in me, and I think it applies to what we're trying to get at here, but we keep going on rabbit trails, and I'm fine with that. This is always a fun when this happens. But you mentioned like the tall thing, and I used in a previous podcast I was like appearances on recently. So I think the guy said something about like not liking labels or something like that, and I was like, okay, well, I mean, all that a label is just a way to give a approximation of your belief set. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if there's a label that's apt for what you believe, it's cool to use it. But if you identify yourself by that and like you're dogmatic with it, that's a different story. Because I used the example of tall, and that's what sparked my memory. Because it was like if you have a buddy who's like 6'5", and I'm like, dude, you're pretty tall, and he goes, I don't like labels, and you're like, well, okay, but like I feel like it's a pretty good descriptor of what you are. And like that's right. Kind of how I see me with agorism is like these are roughly kind of what I believe ish, but like I'm not like tied to it. So like if I ever change my beliefs at any point, I'm not gonna be like, whoa, I'm not gonna like I don't know. I don't feel like I'm gonna fight it. And I feel like maybe in a weird thing, I feel like it's actually kind of a lesson I learned from agorism, because a large part of agorism, and it's been a while since I've read New Libertarian Manifesto and Agorist Primer, so maybe I'm a little bit behind, but like I do remember some of the lessons I got from it wasn't so much to be set in these dichotomies, and it was like, because a big part of agorism is how like it's not that you have to be the guy who runs off in the woods and fucking, becomes, the Bear Grylls or whatever, and, hides away from, everything. It's supposed to be whatever you can handle, whatever risk you're willing to take on. Like, it's essentially different for everyone. It's like, essentially, it changed. Like, for me, agorism changed my thinking of theory and stuff like that and especially like, say, public, private, like that type of thing, from along the lines of going from a dichotomy to a spectrum. And like, so it is weird that there has been born out of this movement so many people who are so dogmatic and so religious. And because I took that very line of thinking, especially like the public private, that's a very common thing with agorism, because they're a big part of agorism is to try to, not support, corporations if you can, but it doesn't mean you're a bad agorist if you do. It's just kind of if you can. And it just seems weird that like out of this like kind of reasonable line of thinking out was born dogmatism. And I have seen a lot of people in this line of thinking that is like one or the other. Like when it comes to like different practices, I've said many times, I'm not a 0 or a 1. I have order of preferences. I just am of the opinion not engaging politically is probably the best. But now I have no problem telling you other political practices I find to be more or less preferable. Like if I was to like I think Hoppian, like the Hoppian strategy is probably the next best strategy aside from agorism, in my opinion.
Entirely. Right.
But but I feel like there are some agorists that won't even admit that, because like that's betraying their principles. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know if you have anything to go on that, because I guess you do like to talk about like identity and stuff a lot. And I guess maybe it's because my identity is more backed up in egoism than it is in agorism. I don't know. So, and that's kind of
certainly earlier. Like, I think what you just described is somebody reading something with an open mind and taking the best of it, and, taking the best of it and running with it as best you're able, right? Like, these are the things that you picked up from reading it, and somebody else picking up something from reading it is different. I do always like to say there's a difference between the philosopher and his followers, right? The thinker and what comes after, right? There's a difference between Karl Marx writing in a specific historical period and Marxism, which has lasted now. What we now deal with the specter of Marx today, I would say, and like critical theory and other things like that. There's correlations with progressivism, but only because of the time frame.
You're already hitting on my biggest critique of agorism. But go on.
Am I? I'm just delineating thought as it exists. Specific. So for me, right. So what I identify with agorism, and I've talked about the paradox of identity on your show before. So I recognize that there can be misunderstandings between people because we might define things differently, right? And the part of what philosophy does. Part of like what philosophy did at its inception, at least in the Western tradition, was try to reconcile different religious beliefs through the use of reason, right? So like it is in that spirit that I walk as well. What stands out to agorism to me, right? Because you like I said, like you're taking what's good from it, you're maybe leaving behind what's bad. What stands out to me about agorism, and always has, is their very strict adherence to an anti-politics stance. Now, for some people, that's like you is like, yeah, I'm not really going to run for office. Probably not going to help somebody run for office. Maybe I'll go vote if it's my buddy and it's in my town and it's not that. I don't want to presume your position. I'm just trying to say, like, there might be a situation in which you would consider voting, but you're not participating in the cult of American democracy. You're not going to jump out your seat on Tuesday just because it's voting day. It's like that is very different from the people who are going to virtue signal and moralize and say that government is all slavery. And therefore, if you are going to participate in any part of the political process, you are aiding and abetting slavery, and you believe in slavery, as the case may be. very, very, and I just point out the obvious irony of this. This is the absurdity in like a moralizer who doesn't have anything underneath them, right? It's when you can point out the absurdity really quickly, namely like, okay, so just for the record, people, all of you who were inspired by Ron Paul in 2008 and 2012 that are now agorists, you are calling that man an immoral person. Like, I don't pretend to be a Ron Paul acolyte. I have tremendous respect for the man. I think he deserves all the adulation in the world. But like, I just want to be very clear about that. If you got into politics in 2008 and 2012 because of Ron Paul, and then you found agorism later afterwards, it's like under the strictures of that system, where voting, where participating in the electoral process is akin to supporting slavery and is therefore an immoral act. If that's what you're doing, then you're saying that if that's what you're going to claim, then you're going to say that Ron Paul is an immoral man by his actions, by what he spent his life doing. And that obvious dissonance like disproves the whole anti-political stance from my perspective.
I mean, I this is why I don't make the moral argument. I think the moral argument's fucking retarded, honestly. I cannot wrap my head around the moral argument.
Okay, but that's so funny that you said that, right? Because I think for some people the moral argument is the center of it.
Yeah, and I guess that's another big issue of where I break away from some of the other agorists, because I tried to wrap my head around the moral argument, because people make the moral argument, and to me the moral argument comes off as this like, we can't stand to just have anything, we have to have it's almost like they have to have the moral argument. It's like, why can't you just have the practical argument? Why do you have to have the moral argument? Like, because all right, let's boil down voting to the very basic of what it is. Voting is the best example. Voting is essentially a coercive entity giving you a choice between two things. That's all it is. Like, so at its very basic, the like what I like to use typically is like, if a gunman pulled my wife and a stranger out of a crowd and put their two guns to both their heads, it says pick. Like, that's what voting is at its very core. It's a similar principle, but different degree. And like, obviously I would make the case that not voting is, more advantageous, but I can totally construe voting situations in which I would vote. And I don't find that immoral. And anyone who's read Spooner would know this is the case. Spooner does a very articulate legal way of breaking this down completely. Like people are put in situations in which they think, if I do this act, it will alleviate in some way the fucking yoke of oppression that is upon me. Now, that may or may not actually be the truth, but this is what they believe in the moment. And so I'm of the agorist mind of that it's generally not the truth. There are probably situations in which it is the truth. Obviously, the gunman bullet to the head situation, that is the truth. I should pick my wife really fucking quick. So like, because me going, I'm not going to vote here, like, it's probably not going to work out well for me.
Right. Well, it's not going to work out well for you if he chooses the other woman, not your wife.
Exactly. I mean, but yeah, I mean, you get the idea. That's what voting is. So I don't understand how, for someone to say it's immoral is to say that situation I just gave is immoral. And I get it. It's ridiculous and it's different than voting, but this is a reductio ad absurdum. Like, this is the very basic principle of what it is. And if you can say it's immoral for me to pick my wife in that situation, sure. But I'm like, I don't get how you have the most like untenable moral structure I've ever heard of. So like, I don't know how you get there from here. And
much like the elites going to a climate change summit in private jets, or, like celebrities taking private yachts or whatever, much in that way, like, you have to completely ignore the obvious shortcomings of your argument, or you have to completely ignore, and again, this is of a specific strain, right? Especially the people who adopt the moral framework. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think it's illuminative to where that divide probably occurs. But it's the same thing for the person who accepts them. Like, you have to then, you're like, you simultaneously will spend your days railing against the political system, but you're also kind of pretending like it doesn't exist and it doesn't matter, because all we need to do is build the Agora, which I have to say is a little ahistorical for my taste, which I think bolsters my case that, it just breeds a dogmatism in the it breeds a dogmatism in amongst certain thinkers, right? Because like the whole I've walked in the Agora in Athens. Like, it's not like difficult to do. It's open to the public if you can make your way to Athens. But like, Agora literally just means open market, right? They were just these open air markets that existed in ancient Greece. Now, and And what I would argue is what Konkin, and I might be arguing a little bit from ignorance here, but I don't think I'm far off, so please correct me where I'm wrong, is he's like effectively creating a utopia with the Agora. And I think arguing from any perspective of utopia is a mistake, right? And that is, those are arguments left to people from 1,000 years ago, and we got to get better than that, right? Like Plato, and even in Plato's formulation of the utopia, it was either the place, depending on the pronunciation, it was like the place that could never exist, or like the perfect place. If you want to talk about the perfect place and then figure out how to get there from here, great. But if you're talking about the place that never exists, which is more the common phrasing of utopia, if you're talking about the place that can never exist, then I'm not interested in what your philosophy has to offer. If we can even, I just don't see the use. If you're literally saying, well, we want to make a world that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is kind of, I meant to bring this up before, but I guess my major critique of agorism is agorists. So it's kind of the idea of like, the difference you brought before between the actual philosopher and then the people who are the followers of said philosopher. And it may not necessarily always follow up with the philosophy, because I don't recall. I mean, I guess Konkin was sort of utopian, but sort of not. Like his view of history or the future was that essentially that as the Agora grows, the state will sort of shrink, and not even necessarily shrink. It may just be displaced, which is why I've liked Andrew's conception of archetropism and how it kind of applies to like Newton's laws of of whatever the fuck. Thermodynamics, I forget.
Physics, but the laws of thermodynamics,
physics, whatever.
Or what? Yeah, he bases it off the laws of thermodynamics.
Which, because I can kind of apply that concept to how Konkin's concept of how that works, and how as the Agora, as freedom grows, it will just displace authority to somewhere else, and it will most likely become more concentrated.
Sure.
I think over time, he kind of has this conception of power being one thing, and there's coercive and non-coercive power in there. And I think over time, the non-coercive power, but that's getting way too deep. But the point being is, I think as, if there were, say magically we were able to get everyone to go in like the Agora route, or even just, not even that, just because I think incentives are kind of in place where we're at now. And I think things are kind of moving a certain way. People are moving their incentives. If you value freedom, you move that way. And if you value your fucking chains or whatever, you move that way. So I think whether you have the perfect praxis or not, I think things are naturally kind of moving one way or the other. So I think essentially my point I'm getting at is, I think as freedom increases, I think also authoritarianism will increase. And I think, but it will just be in different places. Or more
I like
decentralized.
The distinction, because we have this like natural dichotomy between libertarian and authoritarian, and that tends to be how we conceptualize things. Like tyranny is really the issue.
Yeah.
Like if you are in rehab and the person in rehab is really authoritarian to you, like that's probably a good thing. Like it probably sucks in the short term for you, because you're in rehab and you're trying to get clean off of heroin, let's say. Like maybe that bum that was hanging out in the park is now in a rehab center, and the person who runs is a little authoritarian, right? Maybe he makes him wake up every day at 6 a.m. or else. Well, it turns out that actually,
where will they go? Who cares?
Yeah, it's like, but it turns out like that actually works. Some people need that kind of structure and routine, right? And like some people can like implement it themselves, and some people need help. So like it's just an interesting thing of like, we use this word authority, and it's tyranny it's not that we're dealing with too much authority, we're dealing with tyranny of today. And to the specifics of like, I think you can still, I'm not saying that you can't read Konkin and gain good insights from him. He was a man who wrote at a particular point in history. What I made clear in the post-libertarian moment to find is that this is really just, we are as far away from the post-World War II order as we are from, not like in terms of years, but just in terms of major human events. Like the end of World War II, we've had so many major world events since then. Just in the 21st century, we've had, let's see, 9/11. We've had, like the ones that I've hit on much really hard recently is like 9/11, Trump, COVID. Like these are three, like, for whatever else you might say about those things, those are three life-defining moments for people. Like, oops, like it's one of those things that you'll have that conversation of, where were you? Like I think I don't know exactly where I was, but I can remember being at work the day after Trump was elected when it all came out in 2016. I can remember getting home at like 10, I was maybe 10 years old, or 9 years old. I was in like fourth grade when 9/11 happened. So like, I can remember going home and like my parents like watching the news and like seeing that happen again and again. I can remember where I was when I heard that the governor was shutting down my state. Like these are, and clearly we're dealing with, and obviously not clearly to some people, but what I'm trying to do is galvanize people who are willing to see what's going on. Is like, clearly we've entered into a completely new situation, and that requires any serious thinker to make sure that their preconceived notions are correct. And I think, and and specific again to the anti-politics stance, which is really what I take exception to. My argument isn't every agorist should run for office. I don't think that's the case, especially as you said, a lot of the agorists are the problem. Like they're the problem with the philosophy because they can be really rude sometimes. But it is the case. My point is, like, don't make people an enemy unnecessarily. If I'm here saying like, hey, like treat me with all the skepticism you want. Like, if I'm saying like, hey, maybe we should look at running people for office, and if somebody wants to do that, I'll help them if I think they're good enough. Like, help with messaging and things like thinking about it, certainly talking about it. Like treat me with all the skepticism you want, but don't make me an enemy. And that's what you do when you say I'm being immoral per se for considering running for office, or not seeing an issue with voting, or not seeing a problem with trying to take over the governing structure of a city, let's say, and make people's lives better as a consequence. By the way, I'm a libertarian. I'm not saying that that's not a dangerous tact. I'm saying the times call for it. Like it's like I don't think sitting on the sideline is like you were like to the example of to the example of a gunman holding up a gun and saying, it's your wife or this other woman, and that's voting. It's like, well, I'm trying to figure out if I can get that gun from that guy in the metaphor, right? I'm trying to be the guy that pulls out the gun, and instead of it being your wife, well, I shouldn't finish that thought. But like rhetorically speaking, we might imagine a situation where, you might use something like that against somebody who say, slaughtered millions of innocent civilians. Who passed the order. Governors to Gitmo. That's what I'm saying. So governors to Gitmo.
Yeah.
It's so funny. God. Sorry. It's like so funny sometimes when you're like, I'm trying to like, there's an obvious embellishment that you do when you're trying to make a case and like use rhetoric, but then it's like, oh, but if I say the wrong thing, now you can lose your entire livelihood. So
shit, you had something that completely threw me off. All right, we never even talked about how the whole drama of what even like started all of this. So I don't know if you want to give a quick summation.
Let's do it. Start the drama.
We kept going a little buddy trails, and we've kind of covered a lot of this other stuff already. But I don't know if you want to go ahead and cover the quickly-ish, and I'm sure we're going to cover a couple of the rabbit trails in the meantime. But what precipitated this article that we're sort of discussing now, sort of just pontificating on different stuff, but I fucks with it. I'm cool with it. I like this.
Well, it's I think this is the funny part about it is like I'm doing this and it's like fun and it's interesting, but then there's so many other interesting things to talk about too, right? And that's I think that's the mark of a good conversation, at least.
Yeah.
But I'm pulling up. I got in front of me like me sending you the things. Let's see. Here we go. So the guy Brandon, who apparently runs the that's weird. My phone's being weird. Okay. So the guy Brandon, who apparently runs or like is an editor-in-chief at the Agorist Nexus, wrote a piece that basically was like trying to take to task the idea of taking political power, where he makes the case that it's akin to slavery, that it's that it's akin to slavery, that it's like a problem, that you shouldn't do it. I feel bad right now, actually, that I'm not doing his article justice, so I'm going to have to pull it up in front of me because I want to be accurate. So here you go. So he talks about the arguments were joining the Nazis to change it from the inside, and that's like a problem. These are his headers, by the way, on his article. Spreading ideas of liberty through politics, and he basically says that like you shouldn't do that, even though Ron Paul did it. Rigged system, where he points out that the presidential election is basically a rigged thing, and so voting for president is kind of stupid, as is running somebody from president. He also makes a case in here that the Libertarian Party should be disbanded because it's bad for messaging purposes, and I would actually agree with him on that. What about Ron Paul's campaign? That's where he kind of addresses that point more. He talks about creating a more efficient tyranny. And that last section, excuse me, the quote, what I quoted was this is him speaking, arguing and trying to use their system has only made people believe that the government has a right to take away those rights in the first place. Also, failures politically and legally are even worse because they can use previous court cases to justify taking away your rights in verdicts later on. The only way to win is with mass noncompliance. This is true with COVID 1984 today. We can all fight it out in political arenas, waiting for state courts to go to the government, or we can choose to not comply. I just liken this to leaving your flank undefended. And so I wrote a short article that people can go read, which got a little bit of play. And this, this was like one of those things that got sent to me in a group chat. I'm like, this is stupid, and it's clearly a shot at like the Praxian, like the Praxian mindset. That's and the LPMC too, but like also the Praxians.
Real quick, while I'm still having it on my head, the only thing I would take probably objection with to that last line you brought up, that quoted, I would change the only way to the best way, because that's kind of how I look at it. That would probably be the difference between my thinking and his thinking, because I don't take the position there's no merit in any other praxis whatsoever. I just take the opinion that I think this has the most merit. So, because to, I think, make some sort of case that there's no benefits whatsoever is ignorant, like, of other practices, and praxises. But and even then, I know some people might make the case that you're either moving things backwards or kind of treading water. But it's kind of like you're in the subjective place. You don't know that, but it's this almost immature looking of way things are, and it is kind of emblematic of the dogma that is present in a lot of issues with agorism, I think. So
yeah, so I mean, so taking it from there, right? From that point, we jump off, and now let's see, and then I believe after that, the what's his name, Jeremiah Harding. So he wrote like a response to my initial part, which was entitled "Agorism is Consistent Libertarianism." A response where he kind of tries to take me for task and tries to take me to task. I responded to that with a tweet thread, and then he responded, and like my piece was 1,000 words, his piece was like 4,000 words, so he wrote 4 words to every one that I did.
I feel like his back and forth with you was not indicative of a healthy mind.
You know what? But at the same time, like, I get it. I can understand. Like, in some respects, I was trying to get somebody like him to write something like this, right? Because it kind of proves my point. But like he tried, and basically what he's like, oh well, no, but you don't understand. Like, there's all these things that Konkin said, and they all make a lot of sense. And I'm like, okay, but I don't think they do.
Let me carve hours and hours out of my life and thousands of words that no one will probably ever read just to fucking argue with you.
Well, if I'm being honest, because we all enjoy that. We all enjoy when people are talking about us. So like, I did peep the tweet that he put out that said something about like how I just wrote an unnecessarily brutal response to somebody. And it wasn't a brutal response because it wasn't a brutal response, not because it was super long. It wasn't a brutal response because he didn't respond to my arguments.
Yeah.
Because he didn't respond to my arguments. Like, he basically was like, no, you don't, like, okay, you don't understand. Because what I did at the beginning of my piece was I purposefully twisted Konkin's virtue of consistency, right? Because I'm trying to draw out this difference between being consistent and being dogmatic. And I said being consistent is like the river, being dogmatic is like the rock. The river wears away the rock. What I'm doing there is purposefully turning consistency, as Konkin would talk about it, on its head. But I'm doing that by relying on the common understanding of what a consistent position is. Because like I would say,
the way you did it, I actually agreed with. I actually thought that was a good point, to be honest with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Because a lot of people read that and they think, oh, well, this means I must be dogmatic about these things. I was like, no, it just means you need to be consistent. You need to, understand how, if there's a inconsistency, you need to make it consistent. It's like you're not just going to force your dogma through. But go ahead.
Right. So that was a trap that I laid that he fell very well into, and just spent the whole time basically addressing that, because it's like, no, you don't understand. Konkin didn't want us to run for politics. I'm like, no, I know. That's what I'm disagreeing with. That's the thing I don't like. So I did a 22 tweet thread because I didn't feel like writing another article, and I thought, Twitter might be a better way of handling it. And there was one part, because I was rereading some of it just in preparation for coming on your show. Oh, here we go. So like, and here's a good example, because one thing that I talked about in my piece was basically saying like, hey, look, I get it if you don't want to run for office, but maybe somebody guarding your flank in politics is a good idea while agorists are out there building the Agora, right? Like let me just try and run with the idea as best I'm able, even if I don't agree with all the conclusions. And he said, it's like this guy Jeremiah characterized me as saying that my conclusion is that libertarians should do this by having somebody on the inside who has their backs. Well, great. Now we need a time machine to prove that those people won't betray us or never had the intention of being at our side to begin with. And what I wrote, because he didn't quote from what I wrote, he was responding to an argument in his mind, not an argument I was making. What I was saying is that my argument is that the government actions over the last 20 months necessitate a re-examination of whether an anti-politics stance is worth it. And by the way, like back in January, one of the reasons why I had you on my show is because I was like, maybe it's time to back out of politics altogether. So it's not like my mind has been so clear. I've been changing my my position as time goes on, and I take in information. Mm-hmm. So I did that, and then he wrote like another 3,000 words about what I did, and like kind of again like it's one of those things where it's like kind of to your point of like, is it really like, again, I'll revert back to the fact that I'm pretty sure he has more followers on me than Twitter for saying why I feel justified in keeping up a contentious exchange like this, which you guys can follow. I'm sure Jose will put out the link to the tweet thread, which kind of has all the articles linked there. And so but like at one point he tries to catch me on dogma, because like I said, dogma for the purposes of our conversation is something you take as being true despite there being contrary evidence. And then he says, dogma does not rely on rational categories. That's actually the opposite of what dogma does. Humorously enough, the Oxford definition for dogma, which Google uses, includes a sentence about rejecting political dogma. And what the definition for dogma is a principle or set of principles laid down by an authority that is incontrivably true. And incontrivably means it can't be falsified, which means it's a strict rational category. So like, it's like, but you're trying so hard to disagree with me, and I promise you, if you're going into my work and you're trying to find something to disagree with, you're going to find it, because intentionality matters. Your orientation in the world matters. If I'm somebody who thinks this is like manifestation, this is prayer, this is like a basic hack of like human existence, right? We expect to find order in the world because our brains are trying to bring order to all this random sense data we're taking in. And so therefore we find order. Like if you walk into a conversation, like I walked in knowing that we were going to have a good conversation. Didn't really matter what it was going to be about. I knew that I know we've done this enough times, so we have a good rapport. Like I didn't have to worry about it. Like I knew it was going to be a fun time, right? If I walked into this conversation, I was like, you know what? Jose went to pee right at 9:30 when we said we were going to start recording. Like if I had walked into the conversation like that and like had that attitude throughout, like this wouldn't have been a nice talk. You know what I mean? Like it couldn't have been a nice talk. And so and so like that's why I say like you're gonna you can disagree with me all you want. If you look for it, you're gonna find it. I in fact what I'm trying to do is have these people respond to me so that I can demonstrate what the opposite argument looks like, right? Yeah. And I don't think it's compelling. And in fact, I've been hitting this issue of the moralizing framework pretty hard recently. And I think it's something libertarians need to abandon. Not because we're wrong. I do think libertarians are wrong in certain respects. Not because it's wrong, but because it doesn't work. And why should it?
Shit about that. The only in-group cares.
Yeah, like, exactly.
Because like anyone else you're talking to doesn't have your set of morals, so they're gonna be like, "What?" Like they have found some sort of way to conceive of, and yes, I mean maybe you can make the moral argument, but you have to start from their position. You can't start from your position. Yes. You have to show how they're within their moral framework they're wrong. That's the only way to move them. And it's not really your moral argument at that point. But one thing, while I'm still thinking of it, here's one of my major issues with agorists, and I think it's also one of the major issues I have with atheists. It's the angry atheist dilemma. It's this: I've discovered this truth, and ergo, I'm going to be a cunt. And that's it. Really is, and that's with agorists, atheists. It's the same thing. And it's like, here's this thing, and I want other people to think it as well. but I'm just going to alienate everyone like by being a dick about this truth that I found, and they'll see it and they'll know. And then after a while you realize, like, I don't know, if you're some autist like us, you read How to Win Friends and Influence People or some shit, and then you realize, like, oh, I'm retarded. Like, this is not how you win over people. Like, no one likes this. No one likes you like this. Like, don't be this way. Like,
yeah. Well,
and
I
you
remember,
learn, like, go ahead.
I used to vape, and I had like the big like, and it was like from like 2012, I think, is when I started. So like I was there through like all the, basically I was up until Juul, and I quit when Juul, like a year or two after Juuls became really popular, because I needed to, and or wanted to, as the case may be. But like, so my point though is, I remember having a conversation with somebody, like a friend that I had made in school, and she was like, I always thought that vapors were the biggest assholes in the world. And I'm like, and they're just blowing their vape in people's faces. And like, I wasn't doing it at the time. And it was kind of in response to that I wasn't being like super obnoxious about it. And he said, I'm so like, oh, well, that's interesting. And so what I did was, oh, that's interesting. Why do you say that? It's like, oh, well, my buddy Dylan, I don't know if his name was Dylan. My buddy Dylan vapes, and he's just like the most obnoxious person with it. Like, he's just blowing clouds in the car. Like, it's in people's faces, da, da, da. I said, oh, okay, well, let me ask you a question. Was Dylan obnoxious before he started vaping? And it turns out the answer is yes. Right. And like, which is to say, you, and this is under the paradox of identity as well, but like, you associate some things with, like, you have negative associations with something because somebody did something to you. And that person might just be a jerk, irrespective of what he believes. Right. Turns out you can just be a jerk. It doesn't matter whether you're libertarian or not. Right. as the case may be. And I think what you just said hits on a formulation I have, which is like the secret knowledge fallacy, which is like, I have this secret knowledge. If only everybody would adopt my secret knowledge, the world would become a better place. So says my secret knowledge. And I think agorism, and some of agorism, and as a consequence, a lot of agorists suffer from that same thing. And that's this impetus, that's this impulse that says, well, we just need to ignore politics, or we just need to focus on the anti-politics stance because that's going to create the Agora.
Yeah.
No, because politics exists. Politics exists in your workplace, let alone the government. Like,
you and I both know those are different, but I get what you're getting at. Yeah.
But the correlation is the correlation is our degree with which we can fight for power. And as people from the libertarian tradition, you and I can both agree that, generally speaking, voluntary arrangements are far preferable. But we can also, I think, agree that not everybody looks at it the same way. And so, as the case may be, the question is asked, well, what if we can kind of show people that? Because it's not the case that people are born as blank slates. It is the case that the progressives have been working for the last 100 years to get us to this point. And, and we're at this crazy frickin' juncture where apparently the police in England, did you see the story that J.K. Rowling put out on Twitter? It caused a bit of a stir.
Maybe.
So like in England now, if you get arrested for rape, and this, I have the words, but I won't say the words of what I think rapists deserve. But like, and I'm sure as a father you would agree, but it's like apparently in England now, if you get arrested for rape and you tell the officers that you identify as a woman with no evidence, they will list you as a woman for booking and criminally speaking. That's where we're at. and on Pete's show, I was saying, he was making some comments about like, oh, well, some people are accusing us of being reactionary or something to that effect. And I was just like, hang on, can I stop you here? I think there's some things we need to be reacting to right now. Right. It's this impulse to just like this impulse to do nothing. I don't think again, I know it might be a little esoteric way of saying things, but I don't think it serves the times that we're in. Right. I think there's a time, as the Bible says, there is a time for all things. There's a time to reap and a time to sow.
Yeah, there's a balance. I don't think you should be instinctually reactionary, but you do need to be adaptive to situations. I guess one thing, I guess we've kind of touched this a little bit throughout this, to I guess show maybe my difference in my framework and like someone else's framework when it comes to like agorism. So I feel like a lot of agorists do have the 0 and 1 things, where I have more of a spectrum type thinking, where I guess like you like, let's say for example, me and you were talking and you were like wanting to be politically involved, and you were like, what should I do? And I'm like, well, I think ideally you should, do what I'm doing, agorism, etc., blah blah blah. And you're like, well, I don't know, I really think blah blah blah. Like, if I'm able to get you to a point to where you're gonna focus on local politics as opposed to, I don't know, fucking what would be something I'd put lesser? Honestly, like the LP, to be honest. Like, if I could get you to say like on the federal level LP campaign or something, like if I could convince you to be like actual local politics as opposed to that, I'm cool with that. And that's kind of how I see things. And I think having this kind of, I think being more agoristic and having those type of thoughts tend to move people away from the one side of the spectrum I don't want them to be on. I guess it's kind of the way I see it, because at least my framework, the way I see it, because the more I can push someone that way, the better. And also, I always do maintain this I could be wrong thing, because like that was the second prong of the angry atheist thing I was getting at, is like when it comes to atheism or agorism or whatever, I feel like you get or even just identity, like when you have this, this hidden truth or whatever, the fallacy, I forget the fallacy used, but that was a good way to present it. But like once you I feel like once you get over that initial part, you get to a point where you realize like, well, I could be wrong. And like, but I mean, I still think I'm right, but it's like, I could be wrong. And I feel like it's a good thing to always have in your head. I'm sure you agree with me as a skeptic. So it's like, and so you got to be seated in this humbleness of like, well, if I'm wrong, what are my other orders or preferences or whatever? And so I guess maybe that's why I look at things more along the spectrum. I'm not like, I don't think people should, ideally, be politically involved, but if they want to,
I don't think
hey,
most people
go
should
fucking
either.
Yeah,
like, that's why I disagree with this. That's why I disagree with this LP strategy.
Yeah,
this is I think the people who would maybe want to work with Mises GOP right now, like the type of people that Andrew's attracting, they are people who are going to do well in what they go out to do, because it has actual consequence. Right? If you're going to say, I'm going to run for my local town, and that's all I'm doing, that's how I'm doing. I'm not tiptoeing with this like bureaucratic stuff where I'm trying to take over political apparatus of a party that doesn't have ballot access in 50 states. Like, and to run a national campaign, which is why that matters. But like, if like that's it's a different kind of personality that's attracted for that. And in the essay that I wrote, I talk about, I think, the divide politically speaking. The people who don't want to participate in politics, I completely support you. Please go get married, have children, make good money, make sure that you're stable. Like, make sure that the people in your life matter. Like this politics stuff is fun, but like the last time you and I spoke, we talked about masculinity, right? And like just in this thing that's far more important to our existence than like than like petty political squabbles. But it informs good politics. I don't think most people should be involved in politics directly. Now, maybe if you think it's worthwhile, maybe, throw some bucks over to the Mises GOP or the LPMC, whatever floats your boat. Like, if that's what you should do, and that's probably what most people are going to always do, right? The same way in which like a show, it's the same kind of principle, right? We understand this as market-based thinkers. But don't think that just because that's the case for a lot of people, that it's the case for everyone. Don't misascribe that very basic 0 to 1 binary thinking that our brains are all so capable of doing. Because again, kind of like comparing Pete Quinones to Christopher Cantwell, it's just intellectually lazy. And that's why all you can do, because here's the thing, it wasn't even over after that response to the response. The guy Brandon wrote another article that I talk about where he talks about that government is all slavery, and I have some kind of a response to that, because I think there's an important mindset thing inside of that that I'm looking forward to writing and exploring, because other people have brought this to me of like, aren't we all just kind of slaves still? But like what he said in that, because of course I read it, but like what he said in that is that this is both the prequel and the sequel to my last article. And it's kind of like, all right, so what you're saying is you didn't do a good job the first time. Like I maybe made some like typos, but I feel very comfortable with what I said, and I've refined the ideas a little bit, but not much more than what I said in there. Right, like what the refinement that I've made is hit on this anti-politics thing as opposed to talking about like voting per se being immoral. Same idea, just better refinement of the ideas, which is easier to understand because that's what you should do as a thinker and as a writer.
I don't know, man. This is getting to next levels ridiculous with the replies. So this is like, I don't know if you've ever watched, like, you can even have someone like Dave Smith as a huge Twitter following. If you ever follow like a thread where they're interacting with someone, having a conversation, the further down you get, the less people there are. And you get to this point where there's like one person still following the conversation. And we're like not far off from this here because it's getting ridiculous. And it's even worse because at least with Twitter, it's like, it'll be like 240 characters. Like, no, you guys are writing retardedly large essays to each other.
No, well, see, that's the thing. Like, I'm not really interested in him anymore. But there is something to this question of like, is it all slavery or not? Right. Yeah. We see this on the left, which is, a point we haven't brought up, is how there's like a lot of times these people are arguing in a very leftist fashion, which comes from the moralizing framework, I think. But like, it's like, there is this lingering question of like, what constitutes slavery, and do we live as slaves today? Have we always been slaves? Like, Aristotle talks about slaves. It's like, so I think there is philosophical fruit inside of that, and that's what I'm going to go explore, the interesting stuff. To the extent that I use agorists as a punching bag is mostly for effect. Like, I'm really like, I would go on a show with one of these guys, but like, not one without a moderator, just because I don't think it would be a fruitful conversation. I've Jeremiah has had me on his show when I wrote my Don't Be Poor article, where he admonished me and continued to admonish me that if I claim to be nominally Christian as I do, like I'm not practicing or anything, but I generally speaking don't call myself an atheist. Like, that plus making money makes me a bad person, right? Or that the accumulation of wealth, power, and influence is a bad thing. It's a dangerous thing, doesn't mean it's bad. Like, it's risky, doesn't mean it's bad. It's I think like, if I have to leave the word libertarian behind, that's fine. But what I'm interested in is finding people who are personally ambitious and and in a more specific sense of this word, politically pragmatic. And pragmatic doesn't mean that we're going to appease the regime. Pragmatic means we look at the political system in front of us and we use it to our advantage. We don't get hung up on principles because we understand that politics is a dirty game, right? So like, let the academics.
I guess I would, if I get to a point, like, I guess for me, I still, and I'm not going to go too deep in it because we're already an hour 20-ish in, but it's like, I still see more merit in trying to, break away as much as you can. But God, I forgot my whole fucking point.
But you know what? But can it just while you remember that is, somebody like, what's her name, Marjorie Taylor Greene, like she's talking about how conservatives need to build a parallel economy. So the American right is doing that right now. But maybe some of the people who are like leading that new face aren't the most sophisticated of operatives. Right. So it's like, so maybe we can get some more sophisticated operatives if we're as smart as we think we are as libertarians. Like, maybe we can get some more sophisticated operatives actually helping these people to find freedom instead of the false freedom that people, and like, you could say, oh, that's just politic. And it's like, yeah, man. But like, what else we got? Because I agree with you again, to the point. Like, I agree with building. I agree with the mutual aid. I agree with like community. Like, that's why I dig the whole like Tower Gang thing. And I dig the whole, like the Tower Gang before it became the Tower Power Hour, right? Like, I dig this whole like subculture, this whole community that exists around here, because there is like a frivolity to it. And I've written like that in defense of in defense of in defense of irreverence. I think that was the name of the article. But so it's like, yeah, those things are cool too. And it's not but people are just going to compare it to what happened before. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I know what I was going to say. And my whole point was that I was getting to is, if I do find myself at any point seeing more merit in being political than non-political, I will totally do that. So like, say there's some, I don't know, I don't even know how to really, what a good situation would be, but say like they put direct, it's a direct vote, in for removing income taxes or something, like, and there's no way there can be fuckery about it. then I'd be like, well, I mean, like, but the problem is, like, my biggest argument is 999 times out of 1,000, there's going to be fuckery afoot, kind of like with like Brexit or whatever, where everyone was like, oh, we'll just get out, and then now there's like, oh, wait, well, what about this? What about that? And it's this whole thing. But now, if there was some magical way that could be like, no, this is straight up just a vote, and if this happens, then this happens, and if that happens, then that happens, then like. Take the income tax off. Yeah, fuck yeah, I'll vote right now. But the problem is that's not how it works usually, and so that's kind of where I'm coming from. It's just, but if I'm ever convinced that's not the case, or if there's a hypothetical situation in which it is like, oh shit, like this is one of those rare situations that like might work out in my occasion, then sure. And I guess that maybe that's why I'm more for local things, because I think that might be more of a place where there may be one of those rare occasions where there's more sprinkled of those occasions where it can actually help out.
The decentralist ethic is the common link between all of this, right? And where the where the fellowship comes from is the decentralist ethic, and that's something that I've always shared. And it was even when I was doing more active organizing with the LPMC, I even said, like, I was getting ready to run here, in Illinois. I was getting ready to run a platform that rejected the LP from running a governor's race because I didn't see the need. I didn't see the point in it. And that was one of the first things where, like, anytime I brought that up, somebody who was in the office was like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" It's like, you spend tens of thousands of dollars trying to get ballot access every single cycle. And the people lose, and they lose, and so, I mean, and the question of, and the reason why third party, just to be succinct about it, is like every poli-sci 101. It's poli-sci 101. The winner take all system of the United States breeds a two-party system. It's just a question of which party is going to get kicked out, and if the LP was a viable third party that had like a robust infrastructure in all 50 states, I'd be all for it. But that's just not the case. And I do.
Yeah. Sorry, I do always hate, not to get off on a side tangent, is when people use the argument of, well, it has libertarian in the name of it, and you even brought up that earlier. But it's like, because there's a flip side to that. It's like, okay, but I feel like the very act of bringing that up kind of implies you're admitting it kind of sucks. Then be like, well, it's libertarian. I gotta, it bears my name. I gotta make it good. And it's like, well, you're kind of implying it sucks, and you're saying it has your name. Wouldn't the other flip side of that be like, well, do your best to do not empower it in any way, shape, or form because it's this shit thing that has your name?
Yeah. Well, and it's like, oh, but I can make him better. Like, he's a drunk and he beats me every night, but I can make him better. It's like, listen, baby, break up with the LP. Come on over here. Like, come over to the sense making side of things.
I always find myself debating in my head which I prefer, the LPMC or the previous regime. Because don't get me wrong, I love the entire LPMC. I love all the people. I've talked to fucking Heist before. He's fucking great. Most of my homies are in the LPMC. But then it's like, part of me is like, they were kind of like slinking into irrelevancy more and more. So it's kind of like, is that better? Like, as I'm kind of like, an irrelevant LP to me is kind of good, because the more irrelevant the party is, the more people associate it with the philosophy and not so much the party. So I'm like, I don't know which I prefer. And that's kind of my whole point that I bring up a lot of times, is that like, okay, cool, you might have this principled push, but when do you guys die out, and when did the old hat come back in? And now all you've done is make these old hat pieces of shit and gave them a larger platform, when these old hats sucked at what they were doing and they were already becoming irrelevant. So
or is the irrelevance part of the thing? I think that's this. So that's why I talk about the divide as being between those who want to make political statements and those who want to take political power. I don't think we live in a time for political statements, or better said, I don't think that we should pretend making political statements is just important as taking political power. Like in the context of operating within a political party, you and I making political statements on a podcast are completely germane, right? And in fact, we should be doing that, and we should be putting our focus not on other libertarians, but on the assholes in Washington and the various states that we live in, except for you. You got DeSantis, so that's pretty cool. But like, it's like, so like my point there though is that what I say in my essay is that having a political statement be your highest order of political action is in effect masturbatory, because what you're doing is you're making a political statement for libertarians so that libertarians can make better political statements, right? So it's like libertarians helping libertarians be better libertarians. That's what you're accomplishing. The difference between that and power, and at least in my formulation, just really comes down to the idea of, I would put it as taking responsibility. Like, it's like, don't get me wrong, it's something that scares me too. And like, I live in Illinois. I'm not moving anytime soon, but we don't know what the future holds. But like, I'm in Illinois, so like, I'm not really gonna run for office where I live right now. Maybe if I moved back to my hometown, I would, because it's far more red, but I'll help people. But like, I'm in a position to help people, and and that's kind of my path. Like, I'm not, like, I support the whole like Thousand Liechtenstein thing, Hoppe's model of like trying to take over local cities. I've said this recently, but like, I'm kind of like a nomad who's looking for roots, because I've spent my whole life moving around. I travel for, like, I'm in a hotel right now recording this. Like, I travel for work a lot. Like, it's so my point being, like, my path is a little more like the nomad, like, make sure I have enough money and I got a lot of skills so that I can be employable in different areas and so on and so forth. I'm not necessarily, my personal path is not necessarily building a local reputation for now. Like I said, I'm looking for roots, and like, as soon as I can find a place that I want to settle down, or like, better said, maybe a person with which I want to settle down, like, I'm sure I will find those roots and like be more involved in the community as a consequence. But right now I'm something of a rolling stone, and like, but like,
rootless cosmopolitan.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie. Before I realized that was a slur, I'm like, I think I'm gonna put that in my bio. That sounds awesome. Like, I identify with that, and like, and I'm not Jewish.
I don't get why all these Nazis are bugging me.
Yeah, so man, I've finally I've ticked off the race essentialists.
Well, like, that ticked off. They'd be really friendly to you. Like, this guy's one of us. Like, this guy's got a sense of humor.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like, no. I just thought it was cool. Like, yeah, whatever. Like, but like, so that's what I make the divide as being, and I think it's a useful frame, because I think if you realize what you're trying to do is make a political statement, you approach the conversation differently, right? And so we can kind of understand which strategy is more serious just by saying it, right? Like clearly there's more at stake if you're going to say, I'm going to help this town get better, than I'm just going to say my opinions as a writer, right? Like, we call it the peanut gallery. I'm not like, I think you and I, but like you said, like the whole like, be humble thing, like, I could always be wrong. The epistemic humility is like, yeah, I know that I'm also just kind of a talking head on the internet right now. You know what I mean? So like, I recognize those flaws. That's why I'm not even flaws. I recognize those limits of where I am currently. And that's why I'm looking for the next steps. And we'll see where it goes. I think, that's why, like, people ask, like, oh, what's the future? I don't know what the future's like. Just, how do you make yourself better? Focus on that. You focus on how to make yourself better. The future turns out if you focus on making yourself better, turns out if you clean your room, your future tends to get a little bit better.
Yeah. If you just keep on keeping on. I've just been plugging away like an idiot, and somehow I've had Dave Smith on twice, and I make like $100 a month now. So if you guys keep it up like me.
That's awesome though, dude. I love it. Right? Yeah. Like, maybe if you see if Dave wants to read my essay, he'll see that we're not all evil people. But it's all cool. It's cool. I
think you're on a good trajectory though. Like I was saying earlier, I do think, like I said, jokes. Like you're low and slow. I think like you're building up this great body of work, but not vying for attention. It's kind of like it's the low time preference approach. And I think it pays dividends in the long run. Whereas, I'm excited to see where you go. So
I thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of us saying in this space for a while that like LB, and then like we were just waiting and boom, you hit Pete Sobe, you hit Mark's show, like all right, we've been saying it. So
yeah, and and I'm very happy for the people who are coming along for the ride. And I did say on Mark's show, because he pointed it out, is like a lot of people, because he said like a lot of people started podcasting because they weren't working last year, and like I started and I was still working all the time. Like so this is like I'm still working right now. Like even right before we went on, I was like, oh crap, I forgot to send an email. And so like right before we started recording, I was sending an email for work. And like I refer to my job as like my main hustle. Cause like framework wise, I don't want to think of it as like my day job. That's my main hustle. That's what's afforded me the luxury of being able to like afford the nice recording equipment I have, and and a bunch of other things. So it's like yeah. So I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't crave attention. But it's I do this because I have things to say, and my hope is that will be enough for people eventually.
Yeah,
And
I think that kind of mentality pays off, because people people always like make like grifter accusations or whatever. I actually think being a genuine, honest person doing what they want to do or having the conversations they find interesting over time pays off, and it gets you that. So the paradox of the grifting is the harder you try to attain it, the less likely you're going to attain it, if that makes sense. So if you just keep on keeping on, I think that's kind of what gets you there. Whereas if you're so focused on those things, you kind of just, it fucks it all up. And that's what I think what people are talking about when they talk about grifters or whatever. Like people who are just like, I don't know, very cringe, overdoing it, pushing it. But there is like if you go low and slow, I think, and if you're kind of staying true to yourself, I think that pays off in the long run. So, and I'm definitely looking forward to see where you go. I think we're at a good spot. We're almost at an hour 40, so we probably ought to kill it. I don't think I think we touched like one of my like spots in my notes, but you know what? I guess that's a sign of a good conversation. We went an hour 40 minutes.
I guess we'll see what the audience does.
We barely followed. Like I could do this again and actually hit the topics, and we'd probably do another 2 hours.
Can I ask, like, what was do a lightning round? Give me the questions.
I'll answer them quick, man, we're gonna be here. No. I just had a structure. Like the way I structured it, I had a little outline, and I structured it like I was going to go over every one of your topics, but then we just kind of briefly kind of jumped around all over the place, hit on different shit. But whatever, that's fine. I'm fine with that. It's just it's good. This is my process. I come with a structure, and if the structure goes to shit, as long as I have a structure to fall back on just in case, that's all I care about. But this is kind of the sign of a good conversation is if your structure served no purpose. You're like, well, it's good I had that like safety net in case like but we kind of vaguely hit on the topics I want to hit on while not really actually hitting on the specific topics I want to hit on. So I'm fine with that. But yeah, we're an hour 40. We'll definitely have to do this some other time. I do want to really quick point out my biggest critique. And like I hesitated to bring it up because I just this is my biggest critique of agorism, is that Konkin labeled it left libertarianism.
Oh God! So I wasn't even wrong by saying it was leftist.
No, well, it's not leftist by modern terms. Although the problem is by labeling itself as left libertarian, it kind of is, because that's the quandary here. It labeled itself as left libertarian because Konkin was using a different dichotomy than what's typically used today. He wasn't using like the egalitarian what's the word I'm looking for? The egalitarian not chaos, but egalitarian. God damn it! What? Not or inequality, whatever. But you guys know what I mean. That the typical like leftist, what we're thinking of.
You're egalitarian versus hierarchy.
Yeah. There you go.
That what you were going for?
Yeah, basically. But he wasn't going that route. Like, he actually based his thinking in fucking like Austrian economics. But he labeled it left libertarian because he was meaning in the sense of left meaning not utilizing the state. That's what he meant. Like, because left is typically associated with anarchy. So that's what he was getting at. And then, but right was the using the political power. Whether that these people consider themselves anarchists or not was beside the point. Those are just people utilizing political power. That's how he said it. But the problem becomes he labeled it left libertarianism, and by modern standards, people say, "Oh, left libertarianism. It's in the book." He goes multiple times. The new left, like he has a whole label for his movement, everything. And I think what that did, it drew in the left. Sure. And they have kind of transformed it. Whereas I am very much of the right. I just also agree with basically most of what Konkin said. So I think a lot of what we see of agorism today is very much skewed by the left, because we like to think people like read certain philosophers, say people like say with objectivism or whatever, they read Ayn Rand's books and become objectivists. But there's a probably good portion that don't really read it, or maybe only read a little bit, or only listen to the audiobook once half-heartedly, or kind of read an article and now I'm this. And that's kind of, I think, very much an issue in agorism as well. It's not like there's this membership that you're like, once you can pass the test, you're an agorist now, son. Like it's so I think a lot of people kind of get drawn in from the left. I always use the example of like kind of as a joke that if I had a kid and his entire life I was like, hey, you little homo, and like just like every day of his life, there's a good chance he might end up being gay. And that doesn't even like bash against gays. It's almost like this reinforcing thing where if you like kept putting this thought in someone's mind, you kind of almost make it true. And I think there's something to that with labeling itself as left libertarian. It kind of sort of became left libertarian. So I know a lot of people that blame agorism as having an egalitarian school of thought, and it's like sort of, but not really. It takes the position there will always be inequality, but it will be lessened by and that's actually what a lot of anarchists make. Like I'm sure Rothbard probably at some point has made the same exact point that like in anarchism, you have a less of a disparity, but there's still always going to be elites and stuff. There's going to be a difference. So
and to the point, Rothbard, who was a brilliant academic and a brilliant mind, spent some of his time trying to appeal to the left and spent later years appealing to the right. So it's, this goes again to the point of there being a time for all things. And I think the honest thinker, just to turn the screws on the agorist one last time before we get out of here, the honest thinker uses consistency not as a cudgel with which to browbeat his opponents into moralistic submission, but his consistency is about challenging their own preconceptions and making sure that they're understanding the world better for the people who spend their precious time reading what they have to write.
Yeah. Well, all right. With that, let's drop your plugs. So we're going to be here and we're going to get sucked into another conversation and keep going. So if you want to go ahead and drop your plugs.
I am the mind behind the Been Awake Project for better sense making. You can go to beenawake.com. Please subscribe with your email address. You can download my essay at postlibertarianmoment.com and subscribe with your email address there if you prefer. And of course, you can find me on all social media at the LB Muniz.
All right, and this has been the No Way Jose show. I'm on YouTube. I'm on all the major audio podcatchers. I'm on Odyssey. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter at 2020 No Way Jose. I'm rebuilding from my larger account before because I got nuked. Like I said earlier, you can support me at patreon.com. Just No Way Jose 2020. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good shit. With that, we are out. Thank you. This has been fun. We could have done another 2 hours, but I got shit to do. Appreciate you coming along. So,
of course.
And